here we are. Beautiful. Let's get to notes. Two one. Intro to integers. This section is really the basic beginning of integers. The next two sections, 2.2 and 2.3, are like where we really start. This is that whole concept of integers. All right, so integers to me are positive and negative whole numbers. Example, 5, -2, 10, -22. They're your positive and negative whole numbers. These are the numbers that are found on the number line. Found on our number line. I'm drawing the number line real quick. So whenever you have to use a number line, you're talking about integers. The positive integers are to the right of 0, and the negative integers are to the left of 0. 0 is considered a neutral. It's not either. It's not positive or negative. And the number line with the arrows means that it goes on forever in both directions, which means includes numbers like -1,000,000, -1 billion, -562, positive 227,462, like all of them. All of them are there. I'm adding a page. Everybody good? Okay, so finding opposites. So opposite numbers are two numbers that are equal distance from 0 on the number line. But on opposite sides of 0. Any number line. You guys are ready. I'll take it. Started this. So if I'm staring away at the computer, I'm just looking at that. Okay, so for example, examples, 2 and -2 are opposites. And that's because they both are a distance of 2 on a number line from 0. So if you start from 0 and you go to the right 2 spots, you're at 2. And if you go to the left 2 spots, you're at -2. That's why they're considered opposites. And you can say that for all the numbers on number line. So 1 and -1 are opposites. So basically, an opposite is the same number with different signs. So opposites are the same number, but opposite signs. This is maybe something that you haven't realized before, but a negative in many different ways, negative means a lot of things, but negative also means opposite. So when I write -4, I am writing the opposite of 4. That's what a negative represents, the opposite of 4. Just means 4, but going the other way on the number line, the opposite of 4, to go in the opposite direction of 4. Maybe a minute before I change a page or add a page. Everybody looks pretty good. So I'm adding. Okay, so if you can think that way as being opposite, look at this one. Opposite, negative. So a minus of a -5. You can think of it this way: it's a minus of a -5. But I like to think of it as the opposite of -5. And what's
Hey,
the
Miss
opposite?
Dear,
Yeah.
someone had wrote in the chat, what was the last part of the previous page?
What's that?
What was the last part you had written down on the last page?
Right here?
Yes, ma'am.
Negative means opposite. Do you write it down?
She said she got it.
Got it? Okay, awesome. Thank you. Okay, the opposite of -5. So what is the opposite of -5? Well, opposite of -5 is +5, right? The opposite sign. So why does that work? Because minus a -5 or opposite of -5 When you have two negatives that come together, it makes a positive. Equals 5. I like to when I have minus a negative 5, I like to think, okay, the opposite of a negative 5, which makes 5. So if you can think of a negative as a opposite sign, now here's something too. A minus is a negative, something else that people don't think about, but a minus sign is also a negative. And I'll show you why in a second. A minus means opposite. So a minus sign is a negative. If I have 6 minus 2, we know that's equal to 4. But the minus is a negative because I can write it as 6 plus negative 2, which is 4. So that minus becomes a negative. They are the same. A minus and a negative are exactly the same, and minus is a negative. We'll add more to that in a little bit. Okay. I'm not looking at chat too. I'm trying not to look at chat. It takes me away from what I'm doing. So if you have a question, just push the space bar and ask away. I'm really not paying attention to chat. A couple of people had messages. I just sent a message back, but okay. So let's practice. We're going to simplify. I'll write them down first. Okay, these are the ones we're going to do. Let's write them all down first, then we'll do them. And one thing I want to talk about before we do that is absolute value. When you see these straight bars, that's the absolute value sign. So anything within these bars becomes positive if it isn't already. So if I have the absolute value of -5, that's equal to 5. Anything who's negative becomes positive. If I had the absolute value of 6, that just stays 6 because it's already positive. So absolute value will make anything negative positive. But it's only what's inside. Only, that's not how you spell only. Only what is inside bars. That's what becomes positive. Okay, so here we go. Number 1. I read this as opposite of -3. And the opposite of -3 is 3. Two negatives make a positive, so this is going to come together and make two positives, which makes +3. Opposite of a negative is a positive, so opposite of -3 is going to make positive. 2, these are absolute value bars, the big vertical lines. So that means this has to become positive. Now the negatives on the outside, this is outside. So a negative stays, but the inside becomes positive and becomes -2. So negative stays because it's on the outside. The inside becomes the 2, -2. Three, we have the absolute value of 1. That's positive already, so that stays positive. But I have this negative on the outside. So the negative on the outside stays, but 1 stays 1 because it's already positive, -1. And the last one, the opposite of -14, well, the opposite of -14 would be 14. And again, you can think of it again as making both of these positive and 14. I like to think of it as the opposite. Then it makes sense. The opposite of -14 would be +14. Okay, any questions on the basic stuff? We're gonna start adding and subtracting them next section. This is just basic positive and negative integers. Everybody good? Everybody pull it up? I'm looking, see if anybody's writing. Okay, we look good. Okay, so I'm going to that page and okay, so some of the things that you might see from your homework would be something like this. These are all practice problems, different kinds of practice problems you can do with integers. One, graph each integer on the number line. And here are my integers. -6, 4, 0, -2. So you'd be asked like this, graph each one on a number line. So then you get a number line. When you do a number line, always put the 0 in the middle and then I count to the right and I count to the left. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, -4. I have to fix it because I know I see a -6 up there. -5, -6. And when you graph an integer and a number line, it's just a point. I'm going to change the color so you can see it better. So -6, if I graph -6, it's just a point on -6. I'll make it real big too so you can see it. If I graph 4, it's just going to be a point at 4. If I graph 0, it's a point at 0. If I graph -2, it's a point at -2. As I made them really, really big so you can see them. You don't have to make it that big. So if you graph an integer or a number line, it's just a point. Okay, something else that they will ask you too, and a great visual is a number line. Use the inequalities. Less than or greater than. So this is less than. This is greater than. Just in case you forgot, to make each statement true. Okay, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna write them out and then we'll do them together. So I'm just gonna write them out, or you can write them out with me. I'm gonna put a box here where the inequality goes. So when you do these at first, you can draw yourself a number line. If you need a visual, if you don't need a visual, you're good. You can probably answer this by yourself. So if you're not real great with integers, I would definitely that negative. Right, make a number line and then you can see. Okay, so let's look at -3 and -4. Which one is bigger or which one is less? Well, if we go to a number line, and I can look right here, it's in red. See -3, -4. Now the smaller numbers are this way and the bigger numbers are this way. So -3 is definitely closer to 0. -3 is bigger than -4. So -3 is bigger than -4. And it sort of sounds wrong, but with negative numbers, it's like opposite. So with a positive number, 4 is bigger than 3. But with a negative number, the -3 is going to be bigger than -4. A B, -25, -24. Well, that's not on my number line, but I can definitely like sort of kind of think of it. This would be -24, and this would be -25. So -24 is definitely bigger. It's closer to 0. Or you could think of which number is to the right. That's the bigger number, right? So -24 is to the right of -25. I actually like that. Which number is to right? That's your bigger number. Hey, 5 and 0. Notice if you look at 5 and 0, 5 is to the right, right? So 5 is definitely the bigger number. 5 is greater than 0. And to sort of help you with the inequalities, I know these get confusing too, but the open sign, this would be the bigger. Oops, that was really bad. Let me write that again. We have greater than and we have less than. Wherever the opening is, that's where your bigger number should be. This is the greater number, and over here, this is your greater number. Wherever the opening is, it's a greater number. So that's why this is bigger. That's bigger. That's the opening facing the bigger. This is bigger because the opening is facing the bigger. this is bigger because their opening is facing the bigger. And if I look at -2 and -1 is to the right of -2. So -1 is bigger. So my opening is going to be where the -1 is. And that means I'm saying -2 is less than -1. Questions? Okay.
Mrs. Garrett.
Mhm.
I also have like a little thing to help people remember like the signs. At work, I have to train people because I work at an animal hospital and we actually use greater than and less than every single day.
Yep.
I always tell people to use their left hand. Left is less than because it makes an L for less than.
Oh, okay. I like that. I like that. That's really cool. I like that. I never heard it that way. There's so many ways to think of it as, and everyone has to find their way that works for them. I like that. I like that. I like that. So you use less than and greater than all the time. I love it. I love
Yeah,
it.
we have to do that for when we're doing like pre-op blood work on animals. So if they're greater than 8, then they get like a Chem 17 versus a Chem 10 if they're under 8. So less than or greater than 8.
That's great. That's great. How many times, okay, we're all guilty. Have you were in school? When am I ever going to use this ever? And then you do something and they're using it all the time. Math. You don't use everything, but you do use math a lot in life. Beautiful. I love it. Okay. Awesome. 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 I like that. I like that. I like that. Hey, this is for you. This is number 3. Oops, sorry. I like read the highlight. I don't like it the right. 3. Okay. Simplify. These are ones we already did, but I want you to try on your own. Okay, so one A, B, C, D. They're all absolute value. Oh, I got an E. I'm gonna throw in an F, a non-absolute value. Okay, give them a try. Start writing answers down, but don't look unless you want to look. Okay, whenever you're ready, you can look up and put all the answers down and see how you did. And if you
Miss
have a
Garrett,
question,
wouldn't F be -1?
which one, F?
Yeah.
Okay, no, only because this is a negative opposite. Think of this as opposite of -1. That's what it's sort of saying. This means opposite of -1. So when you have two negatives that come together, they actually make a positive.
I got it wrong too. You put parentheses there, so you tricked us.
Yeah, that threw me
Yeah.
off.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad I did. Yep. Yep. It's still the opposite of -1, so it's +1. Good. Good, good, good. Because you'll see it both ways, the way before and the way this way. And this is not absolute value, it's just parentheses, right? Yeah, I see. I got you. You thought it was absolute value, right? Yeah, I tricked you. Sorry. Didn't mean to trick you. Any other questions? It's also my awful handwriting too. Okay. Couple more. We can talk about number 4. Evaluate again, but it's a little tiny bit different. Okay, so let's write these down again. We haven't seen these yet, so I'll explain them as we go, but write these down first. A little bit of algebra sort of kind of going on. All 3 of these are absolute value, not parentheses. And we're going to use substitution. That's when you take out a variable and put in a number. So for the first one, we're going to take out, now I'm going to do it different colors because I need to say it. We're only replacing X. The X, and actually, if you go like that, you can see it we're replacing. We're only replacing X. That's what we really have. We have a negative of a -2. Now, without the absolute values, we know this means opposite of -2. So what we really have is absolute value of 2. And the absolute value of 2 is 2. So we're only allowed to replace X with -2. So where X is, we make it -2. And then we simplify the inside. So negative or opposite of a -2 or negative of a -2 makes a +2 because they become positive. And then absolute value of 2 is 2. B, again, we're only allowed to replace 2, the X, sorry. The negative stays, and I'm only allowed to replace the X. So here's my X. I'm going to make that 1. I don't really need this parentheses this time, so I'm just going to go like that and get rid of the parentheses so we can see it better. And now, you know how if we talked about PEMDAS and like order of operations, so an absolute value is like a parentheses. It's like a special parentheses, so it has a special meaning. So we're gonna do the parentheses first, the absolute value part. So the absolute value of -1 is 1, the negative stays. This is equal to 1, and I have my answer. So negative stays on the outside, and the absolute value of -1 was 1, -1. And the last one, I'm only allowed to replace x with -3. In this case, x is the only thing on the inside, so I'm going to put -3 in for x. I should put it in a color so you can see it. And then the negative is going to stay on the outside, but the absolute value of -3 is 3. And that's my simplified form, -3. So when you are replacing x with a number, you're only replacing x. Questions on that? Okay. Okay, last thing I want to do in this section, and we're going to the next section. Recipe number 5. Use equal to or not equal to for each statement below. So this time, instead of an inequality, less than or greater than, we're going to use equal to or not equal to. I'm going to put a line in between for whatever the equal or not equal to, or equal or not equal to goes. That's A. Drop down A, and then B. There's only 2. Hey, give them a try. See how you do. They're either equal to each other or they're not equal to each other. If they're equal, use equal, and they're not equal, use the not equal sign. Simplify the left, simplify the right, and then see if they're the same number. Another way to think about it. Put the answers in. And see how you did. I'm actually going to write, actually going to explain them too. So let's look at A. So I'm going to do the parentheses first, which is the absolute value. The absolute value of -19 is 19. And then I bring down the negative sign on the outside. Another way to think about it. And then on this side, I have the opposite of a -19, which I know makes +19. And that's why they're not equal to each other. And B, I have the opposite of -4, which is +4. and the absolute value of -4, which is also 4, and that's why they're equal to each other. All right, so I'm gonna pause for a minute. Any questions on anything? That's the end of 2-1. One, two, 2-2. But I don't, 2-2 is about adding integers and 2-1, 2-3 is about subtracting integers. I don't like that. So I put them together.